Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We are your hosts. I'm AC, that's Bry, bringing you another episode of Up Your Rank FPL. On today's episode, how to kickstart your campaign. Whether you are a beginner or a veteran in the game, we'd like to share some thoughts. Join us along our journey. If you like the content that we're going to be bringing you throughout the FPL season, please make sure that you like and subscribe to our channel. Bry, my guy, Wagwan, what are you saying?
Man, I'm feeling good. I'm excited about this episode and I'm excited for the season start to be right around the corner. And of course, with that, we want to ensure that we get not only ourselves off to a good start, but everyone watching this video as well. I think this is a great opportunity to share some of the tips that we've learned over the years as we've been playing this crazy game of fantasy football. Let's dive into it. I know you have a wealth of experience in the game, AC. You know, you do a lot of different things. You look at a lot of different resources. What do you do to go about getting yourself set up for this new FPL season? What are some of the tips that you'd like to share?
I try not to really dive too early into FPL. I know some people might be looking at stats and the prices and predicting starting lineups before the preseason even started. I like to take a little bit of a different approach. Wait until preseason is already underway and do things like watch YouTube videos to get an idea of some of the highlights, who was scoring, who was making the assist, the eye test. I know it's just highlights, but being able to use the eye test during preseason. So you definitely want to check out a lot of the clubs, a variety of the clubs. Don't be biased to your favorite football club, right? So that means I got to watch the Manchester United highlights even when I don't want to. But it's just about being informed that way. Obviously, there are some other websites that can be utilized. Fantasy Football Scout, for example, Fantasy Football Fix. Definitely recommend some sites like that. Alternatively, Reddit. I find that the Reddit FPL posts, they're great topics that come up. You can engage in the discussions and just hear other people's viewpoints, just like you're doing right now, watching this video. Listen to us share our general thoughts and opinions on the game. So that's how I like to kind of get my season kicked off, read some news articles, see what's going on Twitter, on some YouTube channels, some websites, and again, my own eye test. So once I do that, I'm able to use my $100 budget and determine how many premiums I want on my team, what formation I want to utilize. And that's kind of how I get my season started, looking at, not going to lie, the first 2 game weeks. Nothing too crazy. What about you?
Those are some great tips. A lot of helpful stuff there. I use a lot of that as well. Even as you're talking about stats, one of the sites that I love to look on for comparison is Understat. You know, just being able to compare whether it's, XG, XA per 90, really diving into some of those deeper statistics that can sometimes help to make a decision. Definitely some of the things that I like to use. So I love that. For me, I take a little bit of a different approach. Of course, we're different managers. Everyone views and looks at the game a little bit differently. I myself, there are a couple of key things that I like to do as I'm getting prepared for a new season. One is I try to actually plan out or get an idea of what my first 5, maybe maximum of like 7, 8 game weeks is going to look like. And I mean that in a very general sense. Who are some of the teams that have the best fixtures that I should maybe be targeting to have players from in my team? I look at that and I kind of extrapolate that out to 5 or 8 game weeks just to get an idea of where's the fixture swing going to come on. When do I need to look at maybe taking out players for swapping out my players? I use kind of that general template there, and it helps to make some very general transfer decisions. Like one of the big things that's going on this season, whether you're going to be going with Holland or whether you're going to be going with Kane, they're both the same price. one of the things that you might use to make a decision on what striker you want to go with is going to be around the fixtures, right? Who has the best fixtures to start the season, and maybe when does the other strikers' fixtures change? So just an example of how I'd like to use that to kind of get my season set up. Also, another big tip that I use throughout the season is when you're actually making your transfers. So what I mean by that is, after the game week starts, as soon as the first minute of the first game in the game week kicks off, you're able to make a transfer for the next week. And so what you want to do, you want to wait until at least all the games have been completed, so that you're not bringing in players into your team that are going to be getting injured, or getting red cards and getting suspended for the previous game week and screwing yourself too early, before the next game week starts. So it's around timing, not doing your transfers too early, and essentially just waiting until you have the most information available to you, utilizing some of the resources that you mentioned, and watching what's going on in the training session beforehand. Oh, X player didn't show up, something to keep an eye on, right? And so you want to hold on to your transfers as long as you possibly can in a reasonable capacity. Of course, there are going to be things that might affect that, like price changes that are happening, that you're going to be priced out of a particular move. But in a general sense of things, you want to wait until you have the most information before you go ahead and make your transfers. That's definitely one of the tips that I would like to recommend for sure. And then lastly, something that worked really well for me is, like last season, was actually planning out and detailing, just for myself, something very simple on a little spreadsheet. This is the game week, actually just documenting what the transfers were that I made and why I ended up making them. Sometimes it's difficult to look back in a season and wonder, like, why did I even end up bringing in this player? But at the time, it's really helped to kind of level set me throughout the season, because when you look back and you made a note to yourself that said, hey, I brought in this player because the player I had before got injured during training. That's why I brought him in, and it was a straight swap. It's good to be able to look back at stuff like that, as you're going through the season, just so you don't get too frustrated when the results don't go your way. Those are probably the three big tips that I'd like to recommend.
Definitely. I think some of those tips are certainly valuable. We can all utilize that and apply them to the way in which we play FPL. I myself would benefit from never making a transfer too late. There's nothing worse than missing the transfer deadline. Now, the transfer deadline is usually 30 minutes or 90 minutes it is before the kickoff of the first game in that game week. Do you remember when it was only 60 minutes before kickoff? And if you were quick enough, or if team news leaked, you can determine who's starting and quickly make a transfer before the deadline. That was the time, but those days are no more. we have 90 minutes. Ain't no team news leaking. Don't believe the sources that you guys are reading on Twitter. A lot of them are just as good as your own guess. Like Bryce said, pay attention to who showed up in practice, watch the press conferences, hear what the managers are saying about their own players. These are things that you want to do a couple of days before the start of the game week, because that's usually when team news is going to be released and they have these press conferences. So just to add on to what Bri is saying, some great tips. Don't push until the deadline, the transfer deadline, where a lot of players, or a lot of FPL managers rather, might be trying to make moves at the same time and crash the system.
Yes.
And crash the site.
Yes. Yeah, you definitely don't want to make them too early, but not too late either. You know what I mean? Depending on where you are in the world, if you need to set an alarm specifically for FPL for the game week, do that. There is nothing worse than waking up, going to check your phone and realizing, oh, shucks, the game already started. Who's my captain? Oh, there's nothing worse. There's nothing worse than that. Which actually jumps to a point or a tip that I utilize actually since like I started playing. I actually set a bus team lineup as soon as the game week starts. So basically, bus team just refers to, what happens if you were to get hit by a bus, your team would still be set to go up next, for the game week coming. As soon as the game week starts, I do a general swap out of, who needs to come off the bench. This is going to be the captain. I don't necessarily make a transfer, but just so the team is optimized to at least go for next week.
Super, super valuable, especially if you're the type of manager to regularly swap the armband between players. That's something you want to utilize right after you are able to change around your team, even if the next game week isn't for 2 weeks. Doesn't matter if there's an international break or not. Utilize that strategy because you're going off the information that you have now. You're going to go off the fixtures. You're going to go off some of the advanced planning that you did. Most managers plan for at least a couple of weeks. You don't just make a decision every single time, because that's where you're utilizing too many punts, which are not a great thing. You want to be able to use your transfers and sometimes even bank a transfer so you can carry it into the next week, where you can do things like a mini wild card where you swap out 3 players -4, but the bang for the buck could be beneficial. Maybe you decide to do that in a double game week. But these are some tips, yes, to start the season, but the way you start should be the way that you finish. Start strong, finish strong. So use these tips throughout the entirety of the season. And honestly, it's a fun game. You'll probably get good results. Be brave. Don't necessarily trust everything that you read. Don't let someone's opinion sway you. You have to have your own confidence, your own gut feeling, and go with that. And hold on to your decision. You made a decision based on the information you had. You believed it was the right choice. If something doesn't pan out, don't be hard on yourself. That's the one thing with FPL managers. definitely hard on ourselves. But the game is supposed to be fun. So keep it light. Don't stress too much. Hop in a money league and take some of your homies' bread. Ryan, I'm coming for it this season. I'm coming for it this season.
Listen, I'm all for the competition. That sounds good. Like you've been saying, AC. It's a free-to-play game, guys. Let's ensure that we have fun with it. We're all chasing that #1 spot for this new 2022-2023 season. We're going to be bringing you a flood of content throughout the season. We'll be here every single game week. So please be sure to like, subscribe to the channel. Make sure your notification bell is turned on. We will see you in the next video. Up your rank. Take care. Please be sure to like and subscribe.